Hello, welcome. My name's Jenny. I'm part of a project called Climate Action Leeds. And in this session today, I'm going to talk about what climate change and climate justice is, how you feel about it, what we can do about it, and how you can be part of the solution. So do you already know what climate change is? Climate change means that the world overall is getting warmer, even though it is still cold here in winter. And that makes weather all over the world more unusual and extreme. And by extreme weather, we mean more heat waves, forest fires, storms, and floods. And extreme weather can be dangerous for people and animals as well. It makes it hard for people and animals all over the world to live comfortably. And it even makes it hard for nature and the plants to grow. And because the world's temperature is rising, the ice in the Arctic is melting. And melting ice is making the sea level rise. And that puts some people's houses underwater. And that's not really fair, because people from places that have gone underwater will then have to leave their house and find a new place to live, when it wasn't really their fault that their house went underwater. So when something isn't fair about climate change, it's called climate injustice. And climate change is not fair for people who live in places that are already dry, like Africa, because it's much harder to grow food and have water to drink. And when we look at what causes climate change, it's really clear that some countries are more responsible for climate change than others. So it is fair when the countries who are more responsible for climate change help countries who are badly affected by it. So how do you feel about what you've heard there about climate change and climate justice? Okay, so it is normal to feel sad, scared, confused, worried, and unsure about climate change, because it is complicated. And it's important to remember that it's not our fault as individual people. It's the way that we as a society live, and that's been shaped over years and years by the burning of fossil fuels. So scientists say that it is the burning of fossil fuels that has caused climate change. And fossil fuels are coal, oil, and gas. They're formed deep within the earth over millions of years. And so when we dig up fossil fuels and burn them, it releases carbon into the air in the form of carbon dioxide and other greenhouse gases. So high levels of carbon in the air is trapping more of the sun's heat, and that's what's causing global warming. So really, we have to stop releasing carbon into the air if we're going to stop global warming and climate change. But who can make the decisions to stop burning fossil fuels? So really, it's down to the people who have power and control these big decisions. And that's people like our governments, and sometimes just people with a lot of money. So responsibility lies within the systems of power, not just us as individuals. But what does this mean for us as individuals? So at the moment, we rely on using fossil fuels to do a lot of normal everyday things like powering our cars, heating our houses, and making electricity to power electronic devices in our houses and buildings. We've got used to using fossil fuels a lot because they've made our lives easier. But using fossil fuels in the way we are is also making the world worse and harder to live in. Using fossil fuels is not a sustainable way to power things because there's only a fixed amount of them within the earth. And because they're formed over millions of years, we can't just make more fossil fuels quickly. But there are different ways to produce power or electricity using things that there is lots of, like wind, sunlight, and water. And gradually that is what will end up happening. We'll use more and more sustainable power to live our lives. But this change needs to happen quite quickly, not slowly, to avoid lots of people, animals, and the nature all around the world suffering a lot. So we understand that as individuals, we can't make the big decisions to stop burning fossil fuels, but we can influence our government and local councils because we're lucky that here we live in a democracy where everyone's voice and vote counts. And as well as that, we can do lots of small things that do make a difference. Things like making changes to our daily habits and the way we live and what we buy. So most of the changes we can make are around 7 topics, and they're food, nature, energy, transport, education, and work. And all of the changes that we would make around these areas should happen with a focus on fairness so that we can have climate justice. So can you think of some of the things you might be able to do as individuals? Some of the changes that you might be able to make in just day-to-day things. So here's some ideas of what we might be able to do. So things like eating food that's grown locally instead of it being flown over from halfway across the world. We could make sure we've got more natural green spaces in Leeds to encourage nature. We could, as we've mentioned, ask the government to do more about it quickly. You might be able to ask your carers or supporters to make these changes as well, or to help make changes for you. We can recycle and reuse things rather than throwing them away and buying new. So we could borrow instead of buying new as well. Things like changing your heating and energy provider, if that's possible, to one that uses sun or wind power. And also we've got eating less or no meat at all, so being vegetarian or vegan. Now you might be thinking, those things sound hard and I can't do them by myself, and that's totally understandable. So it is a lot more difficult for disabled people to make some of the changes that we might want to see. And that's because of the way society has been built and operates, been developed, not by disabled people or for disabled people. And that can be really frustrating. So we understand that. So what are some of the challenges around making changes to help climate change that you might face? Why might it be hard for you to implement some of those changes? So when we do manage to make changes or do things to help stop climate change, it's called climate action. And promoting climate action is a big part of the solution as well. Promoting climate action means talking to people about it, asking people in charge what they're doing to help stop climate change, as well as trying to make those changes yourself to the things you do and what you buy. So we've talked about what climate change means for the world overall and what we can try to do as individuals. But what does this mean for us in Leeds? So in 2019, Leeds City Council declared a climate emergency in the city of Leeds. So that means that Leeds City Council understands that this big global problem is actually a local problem as well, and that Leeds will need to make changes and decisions to take climate action. But it is complicated because the council hasn't yet made a plan for how Leeds can stop using carbon altogether. So that's why Climate Action Leeds is trying to bring lots of people and ideas together to make a city plan which can get Leeds to zero carbon by the 2030s. There'll have to be big changes to Leeds if we are going to stop using carbon. And those changes will be to do with the 7 topics that we mentioned before. So that's our food, nature, energy, housing, transport, education, and work. And again, all those changes really need to be with a focus on fairness, so nobody gets left behind, and then we'll have climate justice. So for these big changes to take into account the needs of disabled people, it's really important that you're part of the conversation. Climate Action Leeds thinks it's important that disabled people have a strong voice and can influence change in Leeds. So I hope that's given you a bit of a better understanding about climate change. It's given you some ideas and helped you feel motivated to take action. Thank you.